Do you think the existence of OnlyFans is indicative of a deteriorating economy, culture, or both? That sounds like a funny question, but that's actually a really deep question. I'll one up you, Jarrett. I think it's a reflection of a deteriorating economy, first and foremost, culture, and how do I want to say this? Helicopter parenting, a demonization of masculinity, and a continual decline in the testosterone levels of the average male in the United States, along with several other factors. That's a complicated question right there. And I can just compare the guys, just the average guys around that I see compared to when I was young. And you can tell by looking at them that they've got half the testosterone. You can just tell by looking at them. I mean, I don't think it's any secret. You know, you look at that dude at Starbucks with the man bun that's 5'11" and weighs 110 pounds dripping wet. And, you know, ask yourself how much testosterone that guy has. I'd be willing to bet it's low for his age. So if you think about, and then you got to look at the welfare state. So you've got all of these boys that have been raised in a single family household or by a single mother. And trust me, I'm not demonizing single moms. I was raised by a single mom since, I was 7 years old is when my parents got a divorce. So I've got a lot of respect for how much work that is. But the bottom line is you've got a kid that, let's say, is 8, 9 years old, especially a male. This is really bad for males. And when they go home, they're around female energy. When they go to school, 90% of their teachers are female. So you just get, and I'm not saying, listen, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that when that kid, if he's around females his whole entire life like that, and you don't have the presence of a strong male figure, sure, you can have instances where the kid does great, but that's going to be, you're stacking the cards against that kid. And it's a lot worse for males than it is for females, that scenario that I just outlined. So, whether it's that or the amount of plastics that we have in society today, whether these kids are drinking from plastic water bottles that increases their estrogen levels, which I would assume would decrease their testosterone. That's one of the reasons why I always use these. Whenever you see me drinking water, and I just buy these things by the case, and they're glass. I do not drink water out of plastic. And that's one of the main reasons, because I know it can potentially affect the testosterone levels, and that's so important. So, I'm going way off on a tangent here. But going back to your original question, is you've got all these guys that they have no experience. This is their only opportunity to have contact with the opposite sex, is to literally pay women just to text them back and forth. That is staggering. Where back in my day, and I think this has a lot to do with testosterone, you're like, listen, you don't have the internet, you're jam-packed full of testosterone. If you see some hot chick, you're just going to roll up there and say, listen, let's go out. You're just going to put yourself out there. And she may give you the bird. She may kick you in the nuts. She may laugh at you. Whatevs. Next, the numbers game, right? So it's just a different world. And there's so many factors that go into that. But the bottom line is, I think you've got a lot more guys that are struggling with their interaction with the opposite sex right now. And then because of the economy, you've got so many women that are pursuing that just out of necessity, right? Listen, the government locks them up in their house. They take away their job. They put them on stimmies or whatever. And these gals are like, I don't have a choice. I've got 2 kids to feed or whatever it is. I'm going to go on OnlyFans and do this. So there's so many contributing factors to that. But I don't think it's indicative of good things, positive things. I think it's disturbing. Not that I think OnlyFans is a bad thing or good thing. I'm a libertarian. If it's something of the free market, I think that's fine. It's great. But I think it's reflective of underlying issues in society that I don't think are good. And then, from an economic standpoint, to really circle back, I think you've got to look at the birth rate moving forward. And if we've got a problem right now, or have had a problem in the United States with the demographics, what do you think is happening now? When there's fewer and fewer and fewer dudes in society that are actually, I don't know how to say it. Let's say hooking up, or whatever. You've got more and more women pursuing. And again, this is probably not the right term, but more and more women dating. Let's say fewer and fewer and fewer guys, because how many gals out there? And you guys can say I'm like Cobra Khan or something, that I'm stuck in the 80s or whatever. But listen, the bottom line is, how many gals out there want to go out with some dude that's not a dude, that's not like take charge. Let's take, not that you want to go out with a jerk. That's not what I'm saying. But you want to go out with a guy that's got his crap straight. You want to go out with a guy who's intelligent. You want a guy that's ambition, that's take charge, that's a leader, that's going out there and isn't afraid to take risk. And you don't want to go out with some dude who's just quivering there in the corner because they've got half the testosterone as a typical male, and they're just deferring to the woman in every single decision. I get it. We want to be polite, but my guess, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, that most women want a guy that's polite, that's respectful, but also a guy that can take charge, a guy that can solve problems, a guy that's a go-getter, that doesn't shy away from being in a position of leadership. And so that's my point. You have fewer and fewer of those guys in society, but the women will still try to gravitate and date those guys. That means there's more and more dudes in society that aren't hooking up. And if you're not hooking up, you're not creating babies. And if you're not creating babies, then you've got a big demographic problem economically in the United States moving forward, which I would argue is just going to get worse. So, and then you combine that with all the PC nonsense and all everything else. And then here, I don't want to go off on too much. I've already gone off on a wild tangent. But another thing that I think you need to look at is from a standpoint of demographics and economics, is how many more women now are going to college than men. You see, women, and I'm really going to get in trouble with this one, but women usually, from in my experience, and again, tell me if I'm wrong in the comments, but they like to date and marry from a socioeconomic standpoint. I'm not saying they just marry for money and all that stuff, but from a socioeconomic standpoint, they like to marry either sideways or up, right? So you like to marry a guy or date a guy that maybe is at your level of education, or maybe even a little bit higher, or maybe, from economically, maybe is doing a little bit better, or really has his S together, really is ambitious, maybe even more ambitious than you are. The gals typically gravitate towards, those types of guys, like I was saying earlier. So if you've got the majority of, let's say 60% of the people right now in college are female and 40% are male. Okay, well, you've got 60, those gals are going to get out of college and they're going to want to date and marry a dude that's got a master's degree, just like they do. Or at the very least, they want to, let's say they're making 70, 80 grand a year. Ideally, they'd like to find a guy that's making 100, 150. Not that they're gold digging or anything, but they socioeconomically, they want a guy that has, let's call it not higher value, but is just, you see what I'm saying? I mean, I'm digging myself a hole here, I'm sure, but it's true. It's just, it's the simple fact of the matter. And when, I used to have tons of gals that worked for me in very high positions, and they're all at an age where they're trying to get married. And, these gals weren't gold diggers. They're making plenty of money. They're making a lot of money, But then you would ask the gal, she'd sit there and say, well, no, I just want a guy that's really nice and that I get along with and blah, 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 blah. I say, okay, well, if let's say you found that guy, but he worked at McDonald's, would you date him? Crickets. You see the tumbleweed go by. No, usually they wouldn't. Why is that? So my point is you got all these gals that are super educated, which is awesome because they're going to produce in the real economy and we're going to get wealthier as a result of them creating more goods and services because they've got a fantastic education. But they're going to look around themselves and they're going to say, wait a minute, we're all the good guys. We're all the good men, quote unquote. And they're going to find that there's going to be the higher percentage of women, the lower percentage of dudes, the lower percentage of qualified applicants for dating that they'll have once they get done with school. See, and that's maybe I thought about that just because to me, that's the fun thing about economics. Macro is you're just trying to use that as a thought experiment. You say, wait a minute, how does this play out here? Where does this road take us? Well, I think it takes us to less babies in the future and more demographic problems. So, listen, to be very, very clear before I move on, I am not saying that gals shouldn't go to college. No, I think it's fantastic. They're going to add to the productivity, but we have to look at this in totality. And that it's going to be fantastic that the gals are getting education and, they should do whatever they want. But the fact of the matter is it's going to reduce the pool of guys they want to date when they get out of college. It is what it is. So anyway, like I said, that's a real deep question and a great question that sounds kind of like a joke at the beginning. So thanks a lot, Jarrett, for asking. And I'm sorry for going off on a tangent, but I thought it was applicable. It was important, and that's something that I very rarely ever talk about, but I've given it quite a bit of thought.